Discord servers to merge, fall calendar to surge, and the bard and the board converge. I'm David Hood, and this is Deadline, DBN's monthly news program. Deadline August 2026. For our feature story, for several years, the Nexus community on Discord has helped to tie together players from multiple online platforms into tournaments and other events, including 10 seasons of its main event, the Press Tournament. And then came Olympus, another Discord community with its own well-received Press Tournament, which just finished 4 seasons of that event, with the Diplomat show right here on DBN providing extended detailed coverage of the finals for both of those events. Now, Olympus and Nexus are joining forces, and you'll hear all about it directly from the organizers themselves later in this program. But first, a look at headlines from around the world of diplomacy. North America has a new diplomacy champion, although not one who is new to the champions circle. Maryland player David Miller has just won the 55th Dipcon, which was held near Denver in Thornton, Colorado. He prevailed over a tough field that included 5 previous North American champs, as well as many other contestants with tournament wins of their own. Coming in second was Texan Ed Sullivan, with California player and past Dipcon winner Adam Silverman taking third. Miller's Dipcon win topped off a truly amazing streak for him in face-to-face event play, having won 5 of his last 7 tournaments attended. It's true. And in the other 2, he just came in second and third. This year's Dipcon boasted 24 games of diplomacy, social events, a Dipcon history presentation by Eddie Brisson, and a rousing musical number after the hobby meeting featuring a Cameron Higby singing a dip-themed send-off of Gilbert and Sullivan. It was everything you could imagine.
I am the very model of a player of diplomacy. I'm expert at negotiation, tactics, and strategy, and openings at mid-game at the current and historical. The Ponto to Sea Lion, all in order categorical. Knowledge in the previous millennium, so delineation and in strategy. I am the very model of a player of diplomacy. And in negotiation and with tactics and strategy, he is the very model of a player of diplomacy.
Speaking of the hobby meeting, next year's Dipcon was voted to be David Miller's own event in Baltimore called BlazeCon, which will be held over MLK weekend in January. If you did not catch DBN's coverage of this event, please rectify that by using the link provided below, and we'll see you all in Baltimore for the 2027 North American Diplomacy Championship, our hobby's longest-running title event. It's reaching its 56th year. In addition to Dipcon, several other tournaments have been held recently, so let's report those results as well, shall we? Let's start with 2 events from Europe, as the Brittany Championship was won by French player Kevin Lecoq over second-place finisher Stéphane Delouis, and the inaugural Frankfurt Diplomacy Championship saw German player Robert Schuppe edge out fellow DBN analyst Tanya Gill of Canada for the victory, with Italian player Francisco Conta taking the bronze. And then there's the Season 4 championship of that Olympus Press Tournament, which was recently won by Bordeaux as France over Gordon McNeil's Austria and over the Russia played by Ed Sullivan. Hopefully you saw full coverage of that final board right here on DBN. In late breaking news, the 17th running of the Boston Massacre, organized by Alex Maslow, was held in mid-August, and local player Ian Rudnick came out on top, with past Boston Massacre champ John Benn taking the silver, and Connecticut player Rob O'Brien coming in the 3rd position. DBN also produced coverage of this tournament, which is available below in case you did not watch the live broadcast on August 16th. Now, even after all those tournament results, there are still a number of upcoming events this fall for your playing pleasure, so let's talk about those. First up, the Swiss Championship on September 5th and 6th in Sierre, run once again by Christophe Bourget. Then the Gascony Open the last weekend of September in Mérignac. The first weekend of October sees the European Diplomacy Championship going to Chesterfield, as part of the SpireCon gaming tournament in England. We featured two of the organizers of that event last month here on Deadline. That same weekend, the annual Weaselmoot will be run in Chicago by the same crew who will be putting on the 2027 World Dipcon at the same location. 2 weeks after that in October comes quite the trifecta, a real weekend of diplomacy, starting with the long-running diplomacy event at the Carnage Gaming Convention in Vermont, being held once again by the one and only Cat in the Hat himself, David Maletsky. Then on that same weekend on the Australian circuit, the Flying Fox Fandango tournament in Melbourne is also October 7th and 18th, run once again by Zoe Cameron. And then who could resist calling out the name of the third event that same weekend, run by Robert Schuppe in Dresden? Come on, everyone, saying it with me, the Hechtstechen. You can find out more information about these September and October events at the World Diplomacy Reference website or DBN schedule page, both of which have links in the show notes. Let's talk now about the latest news from our various worldwide virtual face-to-face diplomacy leagues. The Virtual Diplomacy League, the VDL, held its latest game day on August 15th, featuring 3 rounds of play for 4 total boards. Our DBN show League Night provided in-depth coverage of these games, along with some games from the Australia-based league, which we call the Snake Pit. There were several shared board tops in VDL action, including the last game, in which France, Germany, and Austria all had 8 by the end. Big finishes of the night included Astronaut, who had a large board top as France in the VDL games, and also Claire Bradbury, who had a dominating performance as Germany in one of the Snake Pit games. If you did not watch that August Lead Night live, then by all means, watch it now. Speaking of the Snake Pit, round 8 of their Season 3 is right around the corner, with games currently scheduled for Saturday and Sunday, August 29th and 30th. For updates on the other 2 virtual leagues, which are the Europe-based 7 Years' War and the UK-based Tour of Britain, navigate to those links provided below. With league seasons more than halfway over at this point, the competition will really begin to heat up, so join in now. Each month here on Deadline, we like to highlight the latest and greatest video, audio, or visual content from those whom we call our DBN media partners. British hobbyist Stephen Agar has just released issue 38 of his publication called God Save the Zine, and oh boy, is it a doozy. Not only are there the usual letter column and game reports from the Classic Diplomacy, Variant Diplomacy, Sopwith, and the other games he's running, but this time he created and has published a new diplomacy variant set in the 1650s called The Sink. Now get this. The players are each in control of a Protestant religious faction trying to take over London buildings and landmarks and other spots designated in the variant as supply centers. Now, who hasn't wanted to play a power like the Quakers or the Muggletonians in a diplomacy game? I ask you. And I can think of several hobbyists, by the way, who are well suited to play the faction called the Ranters. So use the link provided below to marvel over this latest Agar variant creation. And then from our fine friends at the Diplostats YouTube channel, we have a video covering the grand final of its voice negotiation tourney called the Gauntlet. In this 3rd season of that event, co-hosts Ezio and Captain Meme spent about 5.5 hours on this top board analysis, which featured an early exit for Turkey, but some dynamic play and alliance shifts, keeping most of the other powers in the game for quite some time. You can watch the entire coverage using the link provided below in the show notes. Here on Deadline, we like to report on recent examples of the use of our game in diplomacy in the research field. This month, the news is from the Air Force Institute of Technology, where 3 of their researchers are publishing a paper in the September edition of the journal Cognitive Systems Research. The article is entitled Cognitive Team Models in Press Diplomacy. The authors evaluated human group decision-making with the purpose of determining how best to enable machine agents to form cognitive representations of the other players in order to best evaluate their gameplay and to respond accordingly. The authors propose in their paper a hybrid cognitive model for what they call action teams, which is a structure informed by game theory, behavioral game theory, and cognitive team models. Instead of modeling opposing players simply as opponents, they posit viewing the players as non-cooperative members of a 7-member team. It's an interesting concept, and I've got in my mind right now several players I view as extremely non-cooperative, even when I'm not even playing diplomacy with them. So this article really speaks to me. At any rate, to view a preview of this article, please use the link we have provided below. Greg Matthews, aka Ewok, which is how he's known online, has released a new article on his knife drawer Substack. The article is entitled Advanced Diplomacy Positioning. Ewok is a well-regarded online player who started his Substack as a means of diving deep into diplomacy strategy and tactics for the benefit of both newcomers and veterans alike. This particular piece is a fascinating look at why and how positioning matters in this game, apart from the actual taking and defending of a particular supply center on a particular turn. It's truly advanced stuff. Here's some subtopic titles. Alone, they should whet your appetite. Tempo and conversion, board shape and defensive burden, threat, visibility, and containment. Good stuff. He uses specific board scenarios to illustrate each of his points in a thoroughly convincing way. Let me quote from his conclusion to give you just a taste of the article. Quote, center count records what has already been converted. Position reveals what can convert next, which responses are compulsory, and whether these responses will arrive in time. Another quote, the strongest position is not the one nobody sees, it's the one that remains strong after they see it. You interested? Use the link below to navigate to the knife drawer. Next, we offer the latest of our series of segments we call My Favorite Things, in which we talk to a diplomacy hobbyist about a passion project, whether or not related to our game. This month, we talked to New York hobbyist Peter Cook about his diplomacy experiences and his Shakespeare experiences, so the board and the bard, as it were. Peter, it is great to welcome you to our show. First off, I want you to tell our audience how you got into the great game of diplomacy.
Sure. So I went to an all-boys high school, and unsurprisingly, we got up to a bunch of very nerdy pursuits on Fridays after schools.
Who knew?
Who knew? And my freshman year, I fell in with this group of guys who would gather in the History Resource Center on Fridays at 3 and would spend a couple hours playing this game called Diplomacy. And I remember my first game, I played Turkey. I had a lot of fun. And certainly for a Catholic schoolboy, the idea of getting to do something that was very devious, and I think that we definitely emphasized the deviousness of the game in how we played it with each other, was very exciting. So yeah. And then I started playing in high school, but then I dropped it after high school and didn't really pick the game up again for about 15 years. And then I got into it during a period of fun employment when my husband and I moved to Michigan, and he was doing his grad program, and I had nothing to do but redecorate the apartment and play press diplomacy. And then that led to virtual face-to-face, and then back into the face-to-face hobby eventually.
That's a great story. You know, most people can't remember their first game of diplomacy, and I can remember mine. I was playing Italy, and I soloed the game because my buddy Morgan didn't realize that Norway and St. Petersburg touched. That's how much we didn't understand the game that we were playing, because none of us had played before.
I have a similarly addictive. The first game I played, press, I also happened to play as Turkey. This was in 2017, and I soloed as Turkey. And I was like, I'm a genius. This game is amazing. Now, in the subsequent 9 years, I've soloed exactly one other game, which was a gunboat game. That's it. But you know, it helped. It's like when people say they go into theater or comedy, and that first rush of applause, you know, it hooks you. I had that experience when I got back into the hobby.
That's a great experience to have. Would that you would have that experience again? Maybe Dipcon, we'll see a solo from Peter at Dipcon. We never know.
That's right. Calling my shot now.
I mean, it's a possibility. All right. Well, what about the game do you find particularly attractive? That's a good question to answer, I think, for our audience.
I mean, it's a good question because I'm not a gamer more broadly. I don't, there's not other games. I mean, if someone puts a game down, I'll try it out and play it, but this is really the only one that I, make make part of my life in any kind of consistent way. Um, I mean, first and foremost, since I've gotten back into face-to-face, a lot of it is the people. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
I've made a lot of friends doing it this way, both in the local hobby in New York, and also once I started getting onto the tournament circuit. I just really enjoy the people. I think it challenges me to kind of step beyond my comfort zones in a lot of ways, but obviously within kind of circumscribed, safe environment. Um, and it's something that I feel decent at, but not great at. And so that's a sort of thing that is nice to return to and chip away at and try to learn and improve. Um, but you're doing it, and you do it and I have a pretty long attention span. So the span of a typical tournament game or club game suits me pretty well.
So diplomacy as self-improvement. I
Oh
like
yeah.
it. I don't think we hear that enough. Uh, all right. Well, you mentioned the New York club. So you guys just got finished hosting your Mischief event several weeks ago. What possessed you
Mhm.
to do that?
Well, so our club was founded by Johnny Gillum in early 2023. And I had just recently moved back to New York a few months earlier from that stint in Michigan. And I had signed up for the face-to-face registry through Bill Hackenbrecht. And, I think I wrote to Bill and was like, is there anybody in New York playing diplomacy? I'd love to get together with people. And he said, oh, funnily enough, Johnny Gillum is starting a club right now. So I showed up for that first club meeting, which we did in Grand Central Station, down in the lower level of Grand Central on one of the big marble tables. And we've been playing club games since January of 2023. We aim for about one a month, and it doesn't always hit, but it's been pretty good. And so Johnny and I shared a room. We both went to Dipcon last year at the Moot, and we shared a room, and we had a good time. Johnny came in second, I believe,
Yep. Yep.
and we on the way back, we were like, we should just host a tournament, shouldn't we? And the club had been talking about it off and on. Whenever we get together for a club game, we'd finish the game and be sitting around having a drink and be like, we should do a tournament. Why don't we do a tournament? And the obvious reason was, well, money. Organizing something like that in New York, venue in particular can be a huge expense. But then when we got back from the moot and Johnny and I sort of touched base by text a few days later, it was like, but seriously, we should really do this, shouldn't we? New York should have a tournament. The club's been going for long enough now. We have, enough of a base here. Let's do it. And so I work for a not-for-profit theater company in downtown Brooklyn called Theater for a New Audience. And it occurred to me, I was like, we do have that. I do work somewhere that's a big, beautiful glass cube with multiple levels, with lots of natural sunlight and space. And I've been doing good service for this institution for a decade now. And I bet that if I asked nicely, they would give it to us for a very reasonable rate for a weekend. And that's what happened. So, we started really organizing this in earnest back in like November, December of last year. And then at a certain point, Johnny had to step back from organizing just because the pressures of her work. I mean, she does very important work and it's very high pressure. And she very kind of just like, I unfortunately just have to step back. But she had done stuff I could not have done, like build our website, for example. So I kind of took on the rest of the organizing with help from a few other members of the club. But that's what
Well,
possessed us was really, and I think a lot of it was frankly that the Chicago club has such strong Chicago pride that we felt we need to represent New York and put ourselves on the map. We can't let Chicago hog all the glory.
just to give a historical perspective, this whole issue has come up multiple times since I've been in the hobby with New Yorkers wanting to host an event and trying to figure out how to make it financially viable. So the fact that you were able to do it, with you at the place you worked was awesome. Or did you? So let's talk about how
Well,
things went. Let's talk about how things went. Let's do that.
let's talk about how things went. So New York in July is not quite the chillest place on earth. But I remember the day before we were starting, Justin Lohr texted me And he said, "How's the AC in your venue?" And I was at the theater at the time, and I looked around and I saw two coworkers, one of whom was wearing a puffer jacket, and the other one was draped in a blanket. And I was like, the AC is strong. We're going to be okay. Cut to less than 24 hours later, there was a catastrophic failure of our HVAC and AC system Friday morning. So as people began to arrive for open gaming and just socializing, the building, which, as I mentioned, is a beautiful glass cube, became a glass greenhouse. So it just started getting hotter and hotter in there. And people rolled with it. They were very, nice about the increasing like swelter of the thing, but we realized pretty quickly this is not going to work. And then I was talking with theater management. They were trying to get on the problem. It turned out to be such a kind of, once in a decade type, terribly timed problem that it wasn't going to get resolved that weekend. And in fact, it took about a week for it to be resolved. They had to ship in some parts. Very, very thankfully, there's a member of our club named Alan Downing. And Alan is good friends with the people who run a gaming venue just about a mile south of the theater in Brooklyn called Brooklyn Game Night, which is a fantastic venue. And our club had played a bunch of games at Brooklyn Game Night. And at times we thought, well, maybe we could do a tournament at Brooklyn Game Night. But Brooklyn Game Night's space was just a little too small for something like that. So again, all in the gods were smiling on us. Brooklyn Game Night had just a few months earlier moved from their smaller space to a much larger one. And Alan reached out to them and they said, "Hey, can we, airdrop 30 people playing diplomacy for 14 hours a day into your space for the next 2 days? Pretty please." And the good people at Brooklyn Game Night came through and they said, absolutely. They also agreed to let us do this for the same amount, the same kind of, notional amount that we were paying the theater. So we did not end up blowing a huge hole in our budget, which was important. And so we just relocated the whole tournament on about 14 hours notice, and members of the club, everyone pitched in to make the switch. And I think it was honestly a pretty seamless switch, and people seemed to have a good time.
From what I could tell, that's absolutely right. That was quite a curveball, and yet you guys still hit it out of the park, from what I could tell. Well, it's always good to talk with tournament organizers about their events afterwards in an open setting like this so people can learn. I mean, obviously, you had that surprise that you dealt with. What other pleasant surprises did you have, or disappointing setbacks did you have that you think it would be instructive for other people to think about and hear about?
I mean, I can't think of any other unpleasant surprises. The pleasant surprise, which I hope to build on when we do this again next year, is just the willingness of people to pitch in and help, whether it is local club members or traveling players. I mean, for example, we had a function on our registration site where people who wanted to donate a little extra financially could do so. And I was really surprised at the number of people who stepped up and did that in a way that made the tournament, financially viable and feasible for us, it turned out. But also, Keith Worstell came from North Carolina and, checked his own bag to bring 4 fantastic travel boards that we were able to play with all weekend. That really sort of increased the class level of the tournament. And I think even just at the level of our local club, including a lot of players who had never been to a tournament before, just offering to step in and help out logistically, offering to step in and just kind of keep me on the rails. I think that my biggest takeaway from last year is going to be to trust and delegate more, and sort of accept the proffered help that comes from it. Because I think it being a first-time tournament, I felt a sort of pressure to do everything right, but a sort of difficulty delegating. And I think I'm going to try and improve that next year.
Well, those are good insights. Diplomacy people are just the best. That's the way. That is a takeaway, I think, from this and many other experiences in the hobby. Is diplomacy people are the best.
Yeah, and again, when we had to make that venue shift, I was not prepared for any individual. Had no individual person in mind when I thought, oh, people are going to be grumbling. But I just sort of thought, oh, people are going to be getting this text message at like 11 p.m. It's like, don't go there, go here. And I'm like, people are going to be in a bit of a pissy mood about this. And as they say, the vibes were immaculate. Like everybody was so understanding and chill and reassuring that, it was really, I think, the best of the hobby. And I think the other thing that to me was the best of the hobby was seeing really experienced, excellent players sharing boards with first time people who never played at a tournament, but also people who had been attracted to the tournament who'd never played a game of diplomacy before, and people who were trying to play, to win the tournament and up their scores, but were also just kind and patient and friendly and welcoming to new players. And I spent a lot of that weekend feeling a lot of gratitude for the people who play this game.
What a great way to spend the weekend with that kind of feeling as opposed to any other feeling. You know, there are people out there, they hear about diplomacy, or maybe some other board gamers that don't like diplomacy. They sort of give us a bad rap and say, well, that's a game that ruins friendships, and it's a game that, you just have a bunch of terrible people playing. I mean, that's just 180 degrees wrong.
It
Just
is.
could not be more wrong.
There was that Grantland article about a decade and change ago. Board Game of the Alpha Nerds, I think was the title of it. And when people ask me what I do on my weekends when I go away, I used to send them that. But I've stopped because I kind of feel, even though there are some people in that who are still active in the hobby, I feel that it really does not reflect the tenor of these tournaments and the vibes of these tournaments. I think that I kind of lucked into the tournament.
It didn't even reflect the tenor and vibe of the tournament that he was talking about, which was my tournament. I mean, what he did was play that up because he thought that would be interesting to the audience that he was writing for, which I think was true. I think it was interesting, but I also think you're right that it was not entirely accurate.
No, I showed up for my first tournament thinking it was going to be a Shark Tank, and at the level of people trying to win, it certainly there's that element to it, but socially not at all.
I mean, I also just admittedly, the hobby has changed some in the last 12 years. So that's not wrong that it is probably more welcoming than it used to be back then. But even then, that was a little bit of an overblown thing, which is fine. Artistic license, and so forth.
Yes.
Any specific advice you would give to anyone out there regarding either forming a club like you helped to do or running a tournament or both?
I mean, as far as forming a club, honestly, I can mostly just give sort of secondhand advice on that front. I think the digital space is a great place for organizing, Discord, meetup, things like that, but also looking to IRL spaces, game shops, other kind of hobby venues as places to just flyer. I mean, this is really secondhand. I think most of our club's organizing has come from the digital realm or just socially. Rope in your friends. There is maybe like a 10% stick rate with that. Somebody who comes, a lot of people come, they play one game, they seem to have an okay time, and then they are like, but I could do better things with 6 hours of my Saturday.
Right.
But you build slowly that way. But I think something I think as we are now looking to expand the club even further, we are taking to heart the advice that I've gotten from other organizers about advertising in sort of the IRL spaces where people gather. Because I also think that is where people who, are maybe inclined to spend their Saturdays doing such things, have voted with their feet to be.
That's totally right. The kind of people that are going to enjoy playing face-to-face diplomacy and playing it more after the first time are those kind of people. And not exclusively, but certainly that's a good way to look at it. All right, well, let's segue from the game just a minute and talk about your day job. So what is it that you do exactly? You've already mentioned the theater, but tell us a little bit more about it.
Sure. So I'm the artistic associate at a theater company in Brooklyn called Theater for a New Audience. We were founded in 1979 by a man named Jeffrey Horowitz, and we produce Shakespeare. What we like to say is we produce Shakespeare alongside other contemporary writers. We treat Shakespeare as a living writer, as an experimentalist, as a pretty radical and political and formally daring writer. But we produce at least one Shakespeare per season, as in per year. And then we produce that alongside other works from the kind of received classical canon. Like this coming season, we're going to be producing Anne Carson's translation of Sophocles' Electra. But then we also each season usually produce at least one or two new works, often works that are in some way in dialogue with the classical canon in some way. But sometimes just, exciting works by living writers who we think either already are kind of on their ascent to the canon or who we feel strongly should be, or writers from the recent past who may no longer be alive, who we think have been overlooked historically and deserve to have their work placed in the context of and in conversation with works by great writers like, Shakespeare, Moliere, Ibsen, Strindberg, etc.
Well, that sounds awesome. How did you get into this field in general, personally?
Well, I was, started being a theater kid in high school, and then continued to be a kind of relentless and obsessive actor in college, and did a ton of plays my first year of college. I think I did 10 plays my freshman year.
Oh
And
my.
then I made some friends that way, and we wanted to do this play together, a play by Ariel Dorfman called Death and the Maiden, which is a three-hander. And I'd seen the movie of that play. I loved that play. But I said, well, there's not really a part in that for me. And they said, well, you should just direct it. And I was like, oh, I don't know how to do that. But, at that point, I'd done enough plays that I knew I had directors that I thought did a good job and directors I thought did not do a good job. So it's like, well, okay, I'll try it. I can sort of learn that way. And then directing was what really got its hooks into me. I directing theater. So, post college, I started a career as a freelance theater director. And in the course of doing that, I met the woman who was then the associate artistic director of Theater for New Audience, now the recently appointed artistic director of Theater for New Audience. So I'm working with an old friend now who I've had a relationship with for 20 years. And she brought me into the fold of this particular theater, which really suited my sensibilities because I've always been very oriented towards Shakespeare in particular, but classical work more broadly, as these texts which are open to exploration and interpretation and are incredibly deep and rich, in which you can always find new things both within yourself and within the moment that you're living, but that are, known quantities, and you aren't engaged in the process, which is the process of new work, of constantly testing, like, is this right? Like, is what is on the page here, is what we're doing here, what it wants to be? And, with a Shakespeare play, those questions have been worked out a few hundred years ago.
Yeah, so
And now you
some
have the
period of
license as a
time ago.
director to, yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yeah,
No,
some
no,
period
I
of time
said,
ago.
yeah.
And now you as the director have some license to edit as you go. But you're not wondering whether the whole proposition ought to be shifted, adjusted, tweaked, etc.
Um, one of our community theaters nearby, that their summer program for kids is a Shakespeare camp.
Oh,
And
that's
so
great.
my kids both went through that. And of course, I saw a
Oh,
lot of performances. And so I know the answer to this question, but I think, but some other members of the audience may not. Why would Shakespeare or any other person from that type time frame or classical canon as you, what do they have to say to us today? That was a long time ago.
it is. I mean, I think the continued, well, I can only speak for myself, the continued fascination with the works of Shakespeare is a testament to the um, consistency of human nature across time. And I think sometimes people in production, are a little even overeager to sort of stress how contemporary the plays are,
Mhm.
and to claim that there's no difference between those people and us. There's no difference between that time and our time. And I think that is not quite true. I mean, you encounter these plays, they are plays written in a particular specific time and a culture of, religious uniformity, of sort of repression in certain ways, of certainly censorship. I mean, he was writing as a censored author. That you can read in those plays what can and can't be said on a stage in England in the 16th and 17th century. Um, but the acuteness of his characterization, his understanding of human nature and human thought, and his really uncanny ability to put human thought on stage in poetry that is both beautiful and powerfully imagistic, but also, even at the level of sound, just rings true. It's unmatched, and I think that is why he should and does occupy this rarefied space in our cultural air. Um, and you go, if you work on these plays, and what I love most is to just work on these plays. You are just encountering and trying to wrap your own mind around these really profound expressions of human beings in states of joy or duress, and in ways that ring true. And I think it's why we go, it's one reason why any art can both speak to its moment and endure, is that you see it and you're like, oh my God, yes, that's true. That's what that is. And now I have language for it.
Do you think that that is more true with his tragedies versus, or his non-comedies, I guess would be, versus the comedies? And do you think it's more true with or less true with the specifically historical plays that are much more about a particular king situation or whatever?
Well, okay, so I'll express a potentially fireable offense opinion in that
Do it.
I think much of the comedy in Shakespeare, contemporary actors and audiences struggle with. And I think that is why, because comedy is, I'm going to mangle the quote, but comedy is often so tied to the moment that in which it was written. And so in Shakespeare, there's a lot of comedy that seems to be, oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was going to say, even comedy from 25 years ago sometimes doesn't
Yes.
hit, or 15 years ago, for that matter, doesn't quite hit the same.
Yeah, and often, I mean, often in performance, what you're seeing in the comedies has been significantly edited, because all of the specifics have been edited away that are referring to some particular court controversy or popular controversy of the time. And it's why I think often people associate Shakespearean comedy with, a guy on stage holding a chicken leg in front of his groin and sort of wagging it at you while talking about, like, in my cups, eh? And you're like, okay. So I think that the comedies, frankly, or comedy often, frankly, stands a little pruning. And I've directed comedies and done that pruning myself. And I think it is, I try really hard to, maintain what is kind of, I think, the actual integrity of what he's trying to do in that. But then sometimes I've just cut entire sequences or scenes because I'm like, I don't think there's a way to really get this across. So let's just move on. I think obviously the tragedies continue to speak to us because we continue to live in a world that often feels tragic.
Yeah.
And in which you see the consequences of ambition, jealousy, or often, I mean, in a play like Othello, motiveless malignancy, as Iago has been described. I think that it often feels we're living in a time full of motiveless malignancy. So I think that the tragedies speak to us that way. I actually think the histories have a lot for us to find in them. I mean, they're often the Henriade, for example, his cycle of plays about the kings ranging from Richard II up through Richard III, but there's a whole bunch of Henrys in the middle of that. They're about a society that experiences a long, long period of civil war and tears itself apart, and often tears itself. And I think something that is sort of often interesting to look at is that for all that the society is tearing itself apart over issues of some substance, it is often tearing itself apart over the ambitions of petty men and women. And so I think that there is often a lot of very acute psychology going on in those plays, even if the specifics, whenever you see those plays, and we've done it too, and we've done them, they often have in the program a big family tree, so you can try and determine exactly how John of Gaunt and John of Gloucester are, or what is the relationship between Northumberland and the Duke of Cumberland. All that stuff can be hard to follow, but I think when it comes down to how people relate to each other and talk, unfortunately, the issues that society's faced remain relevant to us.
We may not have changed as much as we think we have.
No, but it is useful to look back and as I say, keep that kind of dual vision of feeling as though these are people who are legible to us and tangible to us, but also to recognize that they are a different society in a different time.
I always compare this in my own head to science fiction, where we look forward in a different setting, but we're still dealing with a lot of this. I mean, we use science fiction to talk about things now. We just do it in a different setting, and in Shakespeare would be an example of doing it the other way around. What's wrong with that?
I think that's a great analogy.
Um, some people, when they're looking at Shakespeare or something from the classical canons, you say the language gets in the way. People have trouble with just understanding what's being said because of not necessarily the words, although sometimes the words, but also the cadences, the some of the word order. It can be weird. How do you think people should try to get through there, get past that?
Sure. I mean, I had a woman who was very influential on me about how to perform Shakespeare, a woman named Cicely Berry, who I had the privilege of doing a workshop with through the Theater for an Audience, actually, many years ago. And one of her great insights of many was that, people, even people who do this for a living, if you go to see a production of Shakespeare, at the level of just comprehending what is coming across the stage to you, you catch maybe 25% really of the meaning of what's happening. You'll follow the plot. The plots are not hard to follow for the most part, but just at the level of absorbing the language, because the language is so dense and rich and poetic. But I think that what I would say is just to see that rather than as an obstacle, like, oh, I'm not getting 100% of it, therefore, what's the point of this? It's just to acknowledge, like, oh, this is great. Like, I'm going to get 25% of this, and this is a play that I can return to again and again throughout my life if it speaks to me, and always be finding another 5%, another 10% here. It's also what I think allows, for these plays to be to be worth revisiting, is that a different interpretation, a different actor, your own headspace on a different night, something will speak to you in a way that you've never heard it before. So I think to just be comfortable is what I tell myself, and I would tell others, just be comfortable with knowing that, yes, you're not going to get everything. It's impossible to get everything. You could spend a lifetime with this play and still find things in it. And that's a virtue, not a vice.
Well, to me, it's just similar to going back and trying to read the Iliad and the Odyssey. The plot itself, I mean, it's obviously complicated, but you get it, and it maybe from modern culture. But if you look at the actual language, it's way more than that. You just have to sort of dive in and let it swim. Let's swim in the language, and just not try to figure every word out. I mean, just enjoy the experience of listening to language that's done in that cadence with that kind of format.
Absolutely.
All right. Do you think the Bard has anything to tell us diplomacy players? Let's get this back to our hobby.
So as I mentioned to you in our chat before we started, when we were supposed to do the mischief at the theater, I had this plan that every board or every round was going to be named for one of the plays. For example, round 1, Julius Caesar, and then each board would have a sort of apposite quote, like, this was the most uncruelest cut of all, the most unkindest cut of all. I mean, obviously the plays are full of references to duplicity and stabbing. Yeah. But to give a serious answer, I think that it's less for me what the plays have to say, but more that the process of working on the plays, that it's a collaborative art form. It's not a thing you can do by yourself, really. And I think diplomacy is the same way. And I also think that, I sort of try to approach the boards in the way of approaching an artistic project in a certain way of, this is a limited time and a space in which we can all step outside of the normal constraints of our lives and experiment with different versions of ourselves and try to, we are generally not, I think, in this hobby, particularly duplicitous or, murderously ambitious people, but you can try that out for a few hours and see how it suits you and sort of find, I mean, I think that really good players often talk about sort of finding themselves in it. And to become good is to stop trying to play the game the way another person does, but to become, your own best version of a player. And I think that that's actually quite analogous to approaching any kind of artistic project, that you're not really going to get very far by trying to solely emulate someone. You can learn from others, you can imitate others even, but that to really achieve greatness, you have to find your own version of that.
Peter, what I'm hearing you say is, to thine own self be true. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Indeed.
I
played Polonius in college, so it probably has stuck with me.
And I can't imagine why. because nobody ever pays attention to that particular play. But I would say, doing DBN coverage I have started sometimes to think about the game that I'm covering as a story. And sometimes I'll actually say the story of this game is X when we're doing like a recap kind of game. And in a way, we really are the players in telling a story, particularly for an audience that's watching the game later. It starts here, it goes here. There's some plot twists. There's a conclusion that can be satisfying or unsatisfying depending on how the game goes. There are people who are bit players. There are people who become the leading players in the drama. And there is a way to look at diplomacy like that you're creating a story.
Absolutely. I just did my last weekend with VDL night. I was very kind of DBN to invite me on to do commentary. It's my first time. And that question of what was the story of this board always took me a bit aback because I'm so used to having, really in a way that's very comparable to the difference to being an actor where you are solely focused on your own part in this versus a director who's looking at the whole picture. I'm so used to being an actor who's really focused on my own corner of things or my own version of things. And it was a very useful exercise to have to step back and think about, no, what was the story of the board? Not the story of that player or this player, but the board as a whole. So
but because all these things interact in a way that you can't always be sure of in a 15-minute negotiation period, but you can go back later and look at it. All right, well, let me conclude this by saying, if all the world's a stage, do you have any final thoughts for our mere players out there, men and women or otherwise, out in diplomacy land with all their exits and entrances?
Beautifully put, David. I love how you just came up with that on the spot. That's incredible language.
Isn't that great? It's not like I wrote it out ahead of time or anything. Keep going.
No. I would just say, in all seriousness, that I started getting back into this hobby in a serious way right around the time I turned 40. And that this has really been kind of the way that I have made new friends in this time and continued to challenge and stretch myself. And I think it's really fantastic that in the course of this, I've met people from all over the country, now recently with Greece from all over the world, people from a lot of different backgrounds, people of a lot of different ages, people with very different perspectives. I have felt, for example, I felt last year at Dipcon, there are people who I'm engaging with collaboratively in this game who I would never engage with and take seriously, or not take seriously, but never have a serious reason to engage deeply with outside of this. And I think that in a moment where things feel increasingly scary outside, and therefore there's a tendency to turn insular, I think there's something very valuable about this hobby, about in these kind of controlled settings of these tournaments or these games, taking risks and extending yourself and getting to know people who you might not know otherwise. And so I think jump in.
No, I could not say that better myself. As a Western North Carolina small town lawyer with a particular religious and political background, it is great, spectacular actually, to meet people from around the country, around the world with different perspectives. And everybody should be as lucky as we are to have that kind of opportunity.
Yeah. Oh, but David, now I just hear you saying I'm just a simple country lawyer, and expanding your suspenders out.
Don't think I have not done that exactly.
as you ruin someone in cross-examination.
Well, because all the world is a stage, and we are always performing, whether we know we are or not.
Absolutely.
That's as an old song and dance guy. That's what I think. All right. Well, Peter, thank you so much for being on the show, and I will see you soon at Dipcon.
It's true. I'll see you in basically a few hours. It's so nice to talk to you, David.
Absolutely.
And now, as part of our series of segments we call Where to Play, we have breaking news from the world of press diplomacy tournaments. Let's cut to my interview with Keith Worstell and Jaxson Smith about an exciting new development in both Nexus and Olympus. Well, hey there, guys. Welcome to Deadline. We are going to get to the big news in just a moment. But first, if each of you will introduce yourselves to our audience, please, tell us who you are and where you are and what you do when you're not doing diplomacy, what you do when you are doing diplomacy. Let's start with Keith.
My name is Keith Worstell. I'm in Burlington, North Carolina. I am an optician here as my occupation. In my free time, I like watching videos on anatomy, genetics, history, and playing other board games and card games. And as far as diplomacy goes, I have a lot of hobbies, but diplomacy is 6 of them. I'm on DBN. I'm on the NADF Council. I run Nexus. I have my Heart server. I'm big in the variant community, like my 1862. So, and I actually do face-to-face. So I'm there at DixieCon. That's where I met Jaxson. And I actually host house games with the Cardiac Club. So.
It's true. You do a lot. That's true. Jaxson, how about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Captain Smith. I'm in Camden, North Carolina. Mainly just play other board games or hang out with my family when I'm not either doing diplomacy stuff or in school. And then, sorry. Were you saying something?
No, you go ahead.
And then for diplomacy, I'm running Olympus, and then I also try to do a lot for the variant stuff, run a few different variants about just other stuff in general, really.
Well, Tar Heel State representing here on DBN this evening. All right. It's true. All right, staying with you, Jaxson, because I've never asked you this question before. Why are you such a fan of diplomacy?
It's mainly just a community, really, because it's just like a nice place to be. It's very welcoming for new people, just of like all age groups and all different people in general. It doesn't matter really who you are, you're able to join and just hang out and have fun.
Well, I think that's true, actually. And I think it's one of the strengths that we have here. Well, you've decided not just to play the game, but be involved on the organizing side. So what possessed you to do that, Jaxson?
It wasn't really intentional. It was sort of just a slow transition into it. I started just only playing, and then I started running variants, and then that's where I met Bobsy Builder. He got me on the Olympus moderation team, and then he got me in charge of it. So it's just I've sort of been forced into this position here.
You can't blame it on other people, man. You did this voluntarily. I understand that you're trying to deflect, but that's not going to do it. All right. Well, Keith.
Same situation.
What's that?
So I rose to power in similar situations. And I kind of find that those who want to lead shouldn't lead, and those that have leadership thrust upon them are usually the best community organizers. Maybe not in business, but in community groups. That's very much true.
One could argue that politics might be another example. But let's not digress too far. Keith, we've already had you on the show several times to tell us what is happening on the Nexus Discord server, which you, of course, are heavily involved in running. So tell me about this big merger news. What am I hearing?
Nexus and Olympus are going to merge. The Olympus tournament will be hosted on the Nexus server. That came about because I was venting on the Olympus server about the finals overlapping and the time commitment it takes on DBN for us to cover all of that, and seeing if there's a way. I mean, Jaxson and I have a great relationship, so seeing a way we can coordinate our schedules. And in private chat, Bradley Grace is like, "Oh, I think there should just be like one place for a tournament," and I thought he was joking in the regular chat, but he was actually DMing me, and then we talked about it a little bit, and then I said it doesn't hurt. I could just kind of pitch it to Jaxson, see how he feels about it, and it kind of went faster than I thought. But I'm very excited about it. Overall, it was a personal request for my sanity, but I think it's going to benefit the community overall, just because now they don't have to choose which tournament they want to participate in. They don't have to participate in 2 at one time. It's very time consuming, and we just have a better working relationship.
Well, even though Bradley Grace expressed it may still be a good idea. We'll see how it goes, but it may still, nevertheless, be a good idea. What do you think the merger is going to mean, Keith, for the Discord server itself, and for the existing tournaments you've ever got on Nexus? What does it mean for them?
Well, the only real thing that's going to interfere with is the launch date of Nexus Season 11 in February. We're probably going to push that back a little bit. Olympus is going to be launching earlier, probably signups are going to go up pretty soon. So they're probably going up right now once this thing goes up. But so sign up for Olympus now. But it'll push back Nexus a little bit. But other than that, the United Cup's going to go fine, and every other event is still scheduled the way it should be.
You know, I guess we should say there are maybe somebody watching this who don't actually know what the Olympus event is, what the Nexus event is that we're talking about. So, Keith, just give us just a quick thumbnail sketch of what we're talking about as far as those two different events.
So they're both press tournaments. Nexus is an older one. Olympus rose when Nexus was kind of in hiatus, and so it filled a very vital role for the press community at the time. Since Bradley's had it, the Olympus is highlighted by a multi or two bracket or double elimination. Is that right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Double elimination semifinals and preliminaries, and where Nexus is just single straight up. So to differentiate it, we're going to continue to have the Olympus be the longer format, and we're going to try to shorten the Nexus so we can cater to multiple different types of press players and their time demands.
Oh, that sounds like a great idea too. Jaxson, from the Olympus side of things, why do this merger?
It's mainly just because I thought about it for a while and didn't see any reason not to. Like, the main part I struggle with is I don't have any experience hosting something this large. I don't have the best idea knowing what to do. So being able to be with all the people like Keith at Nexus is just a great opportunity in order to make Nexus as good as I'm able to make it.
That makes sense. How do you think that this combination of the two, coordination of effort, will be beneficial to players that were previously on one server or the other? How's this going to benefit the players, Jaxson?
Well, basically, they just get double the tournaments now. If they weren't playing any other one, now me and Chief both are trying to shorten it as much as we can in order to fit both of them in a year. That way, people are able to play in one. As soon as that's done, they're able to play into the next one if they want to.
Yeah, and I really like the idea of there being two different tournaments with slightly different formats or systems, so that people can, if they only think they can do one, then they can choose the one that's better suited for them on the same server. I mean, there's a lot to be said for that. Keith, let's go back to you. Let's look past the merger just a second. What plans do you folks on Nexus have for the future of online play of diplomacy that you might want to talk about?
Well, outside of our regular events, we have United Cup going on. We also have all our leagues that still go on. But as far as the future goes, Olympus is launching soon. And we have the return of the Cold War tournament coming up.
Oh, yep.
And the Gunboat tournament. They should all be coming up very soon this fall. We're also setting up for the ability to run virtual and the ability to run a speedboat tournament as well. So maybe hosting more things there. It's going to be smaller weekend of things that are going to be the space that we have after this.
Well, that's a lot of exciting plans and returns of things. For those that don't know, the Cold War is a 2-player variant, right, that you can play.
Correct.
Well, Jaxson, if someone is out there without any experience on Discord, they're hearing this interview, they're watching this interview, but they really haven't had much experience in playing press, playing online, how do you think that they should proceed?
Well, I mean, it's just joining either the Olympus tournament or Nets tournament or any of the other events on Nets is just a great spot in order to jump right into it, I think. Just because, like I said, the community is really great and everyone's very welcoming. So you're able to just join in without any prior knowledge of anything, really, and have a blast.
So you're saying plunge in the deep end, in the deep end. All right, Keith.
The Olympus winner was the first time he's ever played a tournament. So
that's right. Yeah.
Never played Italy before and even won.
All right, Keith. Let me ask you to walk through this. If someone is watching this interview and say, "Okay, I'll try this," and they go into the server, they use the link that we've got to invite link to the server. They get in there. What do they do next? Just for somebody who's not an expert, what do they do next?
So on your invite screen, you'll have a bunch of different links to roles that you can get. And then also at the bottom, there's a member center, and each role is listed, and all you have to do is click the emoji underneath those roles, and you get that ability to go in those parts of the server. Everything on the server is color coordinated, so you know what to click if you want to hide it. So it all comes back and forth. And if you have any problems, you can. There's an assist area at the bottom that you can put a ticket in, or you can just type in any channel that you can, and someone will help you.
Yeah, that's one thing. All you got to do is raise your hand, and somebody will come and give you advice in really any of these Discord servers.
2,000 people, someone's going to say something.
Somebody, and it's usually going to be something good. All right. Well, when is this merger? I didn't ask this question before. When is this merger actually taking place in terms of going live as a merged Discord server?
We announced it yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I did not realize it had already been announced. That's fine. So it's already a thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
All the channels are formatted. The Hall of Fame has been moved over. The only thing we have to do is archive some of the older tournaments so they're not lost. But right now we're just going to run the tournament, and then we'll talk about the server later to see. No, it's been 3 years, and we're just now doing Nexus leaks and just decommissioning that. So just making sure that we have, the exposure, because there's probably a lot of people on Olympus that don't check it every day, and to make sure that, they're aware of what's happening. So.
Gotcha. Great. Well, I'm going to ask a question I'm sure that many people in diplomacy land are currently wondering about. Are either of you concerned at all the Department of Justice might just sue you to get an injunction to block this merger? It's anti-competitive, right? I mean, we had competition. Now we're not going to have competition. It'd be like if Coke and Pepsi merged, what would you do? I mean, the answer is RC Cola, because that's my answer to most questions anyway. But what would you do in that situation? Come on. Isn't this anti-competitive?
I'd argue we're not a corporation, we're a community. And I like to think that all of us are autonomous. So everyone has their own thing that they run on Nexus. I have 7 directors. They all have their own responsibilities. We're here to support each other, but we're not here to step on each other's toes. So that's how I feel.
So
you're
saying stop trying to make a conflict when there's no conflict. Is what I'm hearing.
I feel like it's more of a confederation than a conglomerate that's taking over. But yeah.
Well, I mean, that certainly would be your view. Jaxson, do you have any different view? Or are you fine with this monstrosity that you've created with Keith Worstell?
I mean, David, you're more than welcome to make another one to add competition to it.
Oh yeah, there's no question that I have the technical skill and time for that. So you're right. There's no barrier to entry there for me. All right, Jaxson. No, go ahead, Keith.
So there's still Diplostats.
There is still Diplostats. That's true. That is a different thing. Jaxson, do you have any final thoughts about all this for our audience? I wanted to give you a chance to express anything else you want to say about this merger or about Olympus in general.
I think we basically covered everything that I wanted to talk about. So nothing for me.
All right, Keith, what about you?
Olympus signups are starting soon, or they probably already started by the time this airs. Join. This is the time to do it.
I'm going to work on it.
What?
I haven't been feeling good today, so I haven't been able to, but I'll get it done as soon as I can.
It'll be done by the time.
See, this is what it's going to be like, Jaxson. This is what it's going to be like. You're going to have all kinds of pressure from your corporate overlord. I mean, that's just what's going to happen.
Oh, Brett.
But that's fine. You've
he
signed
gave
up.
himself a week for signups. I was like, you need a month. So we got plenty of time.
And then just remind me, after the Olympus signups go up and you got that going on, what's the next thing on Nexus that if someone is interested, what's the next thing that's going to be happening that's new?
So United Cup is signing up now, but it will probably have already launched by the time this airs.
Right.
Next thing will either be Cold War or Gunboat.
Cool.
It's they might launch around the same time.
Cool. Well, that'll just be variants for everybody. Variants to the left, variants to the right, variants.
Gunboat's a variant. Yeah, I got it. Yeah,
it is a variant. I mean, so there are people that play diplomacy like they're playing Gunboat, but that's a whole other problem. That's a whole other issue. All right, guys, I appreciate you being on the show. Now get out of here. Vamoose, go away.
Thanks to all of you watching at home. We hope you have enjoyed this broadcast of Deadline. If you have news, ideas for features, or feedback of any kind, please feel free to send an email to info@diplobn.com, or you can drop me a line directly using davidhood@dixiecon.com. To review all of our broadcast offerings, visit our website, www.diplobn.com. This is David Hood signing off. I wish you brightness and bliss and, of course, Belgium.